Hey, it's Marcel. Let me get honest with you for a minute. We've reached a time in history when building up strong leaders truly matters if you want to grow your business. But managing through fear, command and control, and do as I say ways of managing is not going to get you there. So, what will? In my research, I found that the most effective leadership boils down to 6 key behaviors. They are behaviors that, when filtered down to every management level, can create high performance in your teams and build a great work culture. By the way, this is the new topic that I speak on at company events and conferences and virtual stages all over the world. It's great for keynotes, webinars, half-day or full-day workshops, and leadership retreats. So if you want to learn a clear and practical framework to help design the best work environment for your people to flourish, this is the way to go, and I can show you how to do it. To book me for your event, visit my website, marcelschwantes.com, and click on Speaking. Enjoy the show.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, thanks for choosing to spend time with us today. We're grateful that you are here. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there, and we appreciate you dropping in today. And if you like what you hear, we would be even more grateful if you could share this episode on social media, because doing so will help us get to our goal of spreading the Love in Action message globally to the point of 1 million downloads. That's what we're striving for. We got our target goals, so hopefully you can help us in that process just by sharing it with a friend. All right, so today we're going to get real, okay? I mean, well, we do that on every episode, right? So you're going, Marcel, getting real? Come on. It's a given, right? But we're going to talk about some things and have a conversation with some hard topics. I want to explore imposter syndrome with you. I mean, I'm guilty, like the best of them, and it's more common than we think, especially among leaders and high performers. I know there are many of you that kind of fit that description. I also want to talk about and explore the topic of perfectionism with you, okay? And also self-doubt. And maybe we're going to talk about burnout and hustle culture. Okay, I said these are hard things, but let's be human here. Every single one of us has probably experienced some of these things. I mean, let's be honest, right? But we need to know how to overcome them so we don't get sucked into these bad habits and negative mindsets that hold us back from being our best selves. So to have this conversation, I need an expert. I'm bringing in the wonderful Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani to the conversation. She just wrote a fantastic new book called Becoming Flawsome: The Key to Living an Imperfectly Authentic Life. And Kristina, she reveals the secret to overcoming perfectionism and all of those self-doubt lies in our heads, right? So we can embrace every aspect of ourselves, imperfections and all, because last time I checked, nobody's perfect. So with her help today, we will hopefully help guide you guys forward to, finding your own truth and transform you from the perfect you to the real you. So Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani is the co-founder of Mindvalley, the world's most powerful life transformation platform with an ever-growing 20 million strong following. She's an entrepreneur. She is a writer, an international speaker, an artist, and a philanthropist based in Estonia. Kristina's content has touched the lives of tens of thousands of students and people and business owners by providing wisdom, life hacks, and healthy habit building formulas inspired by her 20 years in the personal growth industry. I am so stoked that she's here because we've been kind of trying to hound her down because she's a busy gal. She travels all over the place, and she finally is here, and she now joins us. Kristina, welcome to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you, Marcel, for your very kind words, and I'm so glad that I made it.
We start the show with this question like we do with every guest. You ready?
Yes.
What's your story?
I'm so glad you actually warned me what kind of story you want me to tell, because, being a speaker and a writer and a mother, I can tell a lot of stories. But the most relevant probably for this podcast is that, yes, I'm Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani. I was born in a country which does not exist anymore, in Soviet Union. I was a teenager when that country collapsed. And that actually probably gave quite a lot of background to what I was doing and how I was perceiving the world. In fact, I had a very interesting episode yesterday. I had some relatives come over to visit me, and Estonia was annexed to Soviet Union around the World War II, so 1940s, and a whole lot of Estonians had escaped at that time, and the biggest diaspora of Estonians is in Canada. So this third generation Estonian Canadian came to visit me, and I realized that I explained so many things with my Soviet past, and I was thinking later about that, because sometimes you might think that your past or your story is the trauma that you carry along, and that this is something that you have to move on and leave behind. But in my case, I think it just is. It just part of the story. And sometimes I said funny things like, when I moved to live in Norway, then my parents couldn't afford supporting me because the economic disparity was so huge between, freshly independent Estonia and old European country. And things like that. But I'm actually grateful to that past. But of course, Soviet Union collapsed, thank God. I finished my education in the New World, so I understand the West well.
Yeah.
I married at the age of 25 because I'm the older generation. We married earlier. And then I moved to New York. I had lived in 6 countries throughout my life, in Asia, US, Europe, and yes, at some point I started co-founded a business, Mindvalley. So that's in a nutshell.
Let's dive into becoming Flawsome. And here is the book cover for those of you watching on YouTube. The title has a kind of a play on words, right? And I think that's going to be the theme of our conversation. But why Flawsome?
The word, it's similar to my own life story. My career and my purpose and my mission found me. So the word found me. Being a proper writer, I knew one very simple rule. You first write a book and then you come up with a name for the book. You don't do the reverse.
Yeah.
So the working titles were anything but Flawsome. The word wasn't there. In fact, the word came so late in the book that we had to adjust the manuscript a little bit so that there is at least the word, but there is no chapter called Flawsome, naturally. So when the book was ready, I was writing a book about finding your path back to you, because at some point I realized that I had lost myself in my life, and I was writing a book about how do you find your path back to yourself. And that was literally what the book is about. And then when the book was ready, I came across this word on somewhere on the internet, and I just loved it, because when I saw it, I knew that was what my book was about.
Yeah.
And I think that's also beautiful. It doesn't have to be the other way around.
Right. So speaking of beautiful, I love the you start the book right from the get-go talking about authenticity. And we all struggle with being authentic. Some of us don't even know what that means anymore, because it's just such a catch-all buzz term, right? And others will take advantage of being authentic by speaking their minds and telling people whatever comes up with them. They don't realize that they're offending and being a complete a jerk. Excuse me. I don't want my podcast to have the asterisk with the language. Anyway, so how would you define authenticity in this case?
I have also come across such situations. I was once interviewing a person who is one of the authorities in authenticity, and we had a very rocky start. And actually, it never evened out, because sometimes people are just too blunt and in your face. But I think that comes from us from us, humanity, being in a rush. So we're in a rush to the point where we don't bother to look into the essence of phenomena. So if you think about authenticity in essence means being true to yourself. And I like to draw attention to the fact that this is about your relationship with yourself. It has nothing to do with the world. So if you were to talk about a force, like a physical force, then authenticity is the force without direction, because it's your relationship with yourself. The moment you use authenticity in your relationship with the outside world, you give this force a direction. It becomes a vector, and it loses its intrinsic nature. It stops being about you and yourself.
Yeah.
Now, so this is one side of it, being true to yourself. Does authenticity mean speaking your mind all the time? Or being so-called honest? Again, honesty is an intention, but speaking the truth, right? Does that mean, do you even know the truth? What is the truth? You can be honest without knowing the truth, or attempt to be honest without knowing the truth. Now, being rude, being blunt, being straightforward has nothing to do with authenticity. It has to do with your behavior and your interaction with the outside world. You can be honest, you can have the highest value of truth and justice, and still choose to be polite.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you any less authentic. So let's not, as a society, mix up the different concepts, and let's not call bluntness and straightforwardness authenticity. It may be authentic for some people, and in that case, they're very unpleasant people by nature.
Right.
But for some people, I'm a very private person. And for me, sharing my personal stories is not an authentic thing, but it might be something that one of my values requires. And then I will do things which are not intrinsically natural to me.
Yeah.
If you, as a hermit, as an Estonian, I live so far in the north, it's already winter here. If I had my choice, I would go to the forests and live with my sheep and my Highland cows, and I'd be super happy.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating topic. I mean, we've talked about authenticity here before, but I want to play devil's advocate. So, can someone be authentic by thinking that they're showing up with their best selves and not realizing that they're manipulative, taking advantage of others, and just not serving to the best of their capacity because it's more about them than others? And so, by having this mindset of this, almost like a scarcity mindset of taking and not giving enough, you think that you're being authentic, right? Because it only serves your purpose. So I'm being authentic to me, but at the expense of other people. So is there someone that operates that way? Are they authentic?
Well, a short answer would be, who am I to judge other people's authenticity? Because if it is your relationship with yourself, you're the only person who can say, is it authentic to you or not? And if a person is selfish and greedy, then maybe this kind of behavior is authentic to them because it corresponds to their true nature and their values. Now, a more correct answer would be that, like in any science, we have to start with definitions. So let's start with definitions. What does authenticity mean? It means being true to yourself, but being true to yourself also means, or at least implies, that you know who you are. And that's where the problem begins, because a lot of us live in a delusion. And the nature of delusion is that we are never aware that we are delusional, because that's the nature of delusion. You're not aware of that. But if you have any interest in psychology, then the ways our brains, I just finished an introductory book on the brain. I really enjoyed it. But it also opened up so many opportunities to me to see how our brain likes to trick us, both practically and actually in more refined terms. Our perception of the world, our perception of ourselves, the way we interact with people. So for us to, first of all, I would abstain from judging other people, because that's their journey and that's their life and that's their choice. Would I want to be around such people? No. If they tell me, but that's me just being authentic, I might not choose to argue with them, but my conclusion would have been, no, that just means you being selfish.
Very wise words. So at what point in your journey did you realize, I don't really know who I am? I'm living a lie?
Well, I didn't live 100% lie. That's the thing.
Okay.
We are sometimes a little black and white. You either lie or you're honest. You either say the truth or you're like saying the lies. So, unfortunately, almost nothing is absolute. Although here I will contradict myself. I think authenticity is to a degree absolute. I mean, once you know who you are, it's really hard not to be authentic. But when I was 40 years old, when I started feeling that I'm discontent with what I have created. So it started with little signs, and the first one was I started the book with that. So if you get the book, you'll recognize the story. I came into the office, and a friend of mine said, "I've missed you," and I just blurted out, "Oh, I missed me too." And when I said that, it was like literally, I stopped in my tracks because I thought, did I just say I missed me too? What do I mean? So that was like, I had a lot of little things like that where I felt that, yes, I'm honest, but I can't show this. I can't admit certain things. I have a perfectly Instagrammable life. I'm married, I have business, I have 2 children, I travel the world, I enjoy my work. I do whatever I like. So I have a very inspirational or inspiring life. And yet, how dare I to feel not very happy and content? And these little things were the red flags that made me ask what's going on. And at some point, I realized that I had gotten lost. It's not that I didn't know who I was or what my values were, but I got lost. And when you get lost, you sometimes start panicking and you get lost more and more. Yeah. So that was probably the beginning of the journey. I just wanted to figure out what's going on. I can't say that I'm spotlessly happy right now. I have my concerns and fears, but at least I'm at peace with myself. I don't want to run away. I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm happy where I am. And yes, sometimes I'm happy to explore new things and to be ambitious and, go to new places, but I don't do that from trying to run away from my pain.
Yeah. I love that you brought the theme of peace into the discussion. I think this has a lot to do with our next topic. So I'm going to transition to perfectionism, big theme in your book, and also I would say in your life, having been born in the former Soviet Union. So how did perfectionism kind of materialize in your life? When did you realize, that came to the forefront?
Well, it was the default regime for me because I am the only child of my parents, and contrary to popular belief, there is one possible scenario for lonely children is that you take the whole responsibility of making it in your family. You can't disappoint your parents. There's no other sibling to be the good one, and you can be the rebellious one. So that was a huge burden for me. Also, Soviet Union was a very idealistic society. I was a straight A student all my life. So I studied really well. I behaved well, and I was the good girl. And good girl comes very often with this need to do things perfectly and need to be right. Now, I think my journey with perfectionism started when I realized that it's not a requirement or prerequisite for being a good person. Just that, good person, because we want to be good people. And whether we admit it or not, and for men, perfectionism just shows in a very different form. Women use the word perfectionist. Men use the word strong man, leader, successful. This is also about perfection to a great degree. You don't allow weaknesses. So when I realized that I don't need to be perfect to be a good human being, that's, I guess, when this dance started. It was a long time ago. And about 10 years or maybe more ago, I heard this wonderful phrase from one of my friends. He said, "I'm a recovering perfectionist." And I was like, yes, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I loved this phrase, and I used it until I was about 40, and I realized that I can't recover from being myself. I cannot recover from being perfectionist. It's part of me. So the question is not whether I can recover from it or I can eradicate it. The question is, how can I come to terms with it and live with it so that it doesn't prevent me from doing things?
Yeah. Okay. Walk us through maybe some of the steps that help us to break away from that, from living that perfect picture of ourselves that really doesn't exist.
It's, it's a little unfair to to give the answer to this question in a short form, mostly because it is a journey. Usually, in psychology, they have this interesting concept that if some problem, let's say, or some trauma took you a certain amount of time to happen or to create this problem, you require at least half that time to undo it. So if you've been perfectionist, let's say, for 40 years, it's quite natural to expect that you're not going to change just on the spot. It will take some practice, just because of the way our brain works. Those neural pathways do require some time to change.
Of course.
So I guess we have to start with challenging a lot of the paradigms which we hold dear, like the paradigm of success. What does it mean? We know conceptually that failure is not contradictory of success. Failure is something that the road to success is paved with. Yet, if you ask people, how many times do we get paralyzed or we stall because we are afraid to fail or to be less than perfect? So in theory, we kind of understand, but do we really want? I used to go horseback riding until I fell so many times that I started being afraid. You can't ride a horse if you're afraid to fall off it. You just can't. So I guess the easiest way, and I will not go deeper because there are so many facets and layers to living with perfectionism, because it's not just recognizing that you have it, but actually being functional with it.
Yeah.
So the first one would be just reconceptualize what failure means to you, or imperfection. Try to live with that.
Yeah. It's really, gosh, the more I think about it, it is, people, we talk about the studies on growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? I think that's Angela Duckworth's work. And it's orienting yourself always constantly to self-awareness, to challenging your assumptions, to just kind of maybe even stepping back from what your worldview is at that moment when you try to impose it on other people. It's like, okay, hold on a second. Let me pause and think this through. Right? Because it's always, when we live in this scripting, like you said, if you've lived in this scripting in your mind for 40 years, there's no flip of the switch. It is a constant kind of challenging of your worldview, challenging of that kind of mindset that you've existed for so long. And I think that's like just chipping away at it. And I think it's conversations that have a lot to do with it. When you sit down in a group of people, right, and you try to force your world opinion on others, to me, I wonder how much those interactions have to do with those points along your journey where you become less, or have a less tendency to become perfectionistic, right? The more you sit down with people and activate your curiosity, right? The more you sit down with another person 2 days later and say, I'm going to just choose to listen today and not speak, right? Are those the things that you're talking about that kind of lend to us along the journey to finally arrive at a point where, okay, I'm not being labeled a perfectionist?
So I'm not afraid of being labeled a perfectionist. And as I said, I still am. And I think I will die a perfectionist.
Okay.
I just know how to live with that. Sorry for maybe a crude example, but in this world built for men, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And it may be a handicap, and it would have been easier for me to achieve certain things if I was a man. But you just live with what you've got. And perfectionism, and I know it's not very fair comparison because gender is something which, well, nowadays you can change gender as well, but it's, sorry for a maybe misapplied quote, but it's Gandalf who said to Frodo, when Frodo said, why do I have to do that? He said, we don't always get to choose the time when we live, but we always get to choose what we do with the time that is given to us. So you don't always get to choose your dragons, but you get to choose, are you going to make them your curse or your blessing? So perfectionism is something which I have, and as I said, I can't eradicate a part of me. it's like amputation, So I just need to learn how to live with that. Now, when it comes to the conversations and the book journey is actually, as I said, it's a journey back to understanding yourself and to knowing yourself. So I'm not following my own path because I'm quite aware that my own journey is my own journey, and maybe some people would find it interesting to read, but I didn't want to write a book about myself. It's not a book about me, not even about my experience, but it's inspired by my experience. And sometimes I use my life as an illustration. But this book is the reader's journey. The moment somebody picks up the book, it's their journey. And how they're going to walk that journey depends on their circumstances, on their worldview right now, on their experiences. And for some people, it's about perfectionism. For other people, it's the reverse of that. When I started publicizing the book, I realized there were different types of people, and very similar to perfectionism is this underdog type, the type that is actually pretty good with failure and with the imperfection, but they have issues with their self-worth. You mentioned it a little bit, the imposter syndrome. I sometimes struggle with both the imposter syndrome and also the question, why am I not as famous as I should be? Why is this person having like 3 million followers when they say such tried, boring stuff? So what kind of dragons the reader is going to encounter while reading the book, I have no idea. There are so many people out there in the world, and every journey is unique.
Yeah.
The important thing is, and this is what's common to each journey, is learning to be honest with yourself. And honesty starts with a very simple realization: I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Any time of the day, I may be wrong. And that is actually such a liberating idea. I may be wrong, because the moment, you mentioned this growth mindset. I think growth mindset starts with just this simple acknowledgement. Any time of the day, I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Then we talk about kindness and courage and all these things. But in essence, authenticity is about your relationship with yourself. And any relationship starts with honesty, with being clear who you're dealing with commitment, with kindness, with love.
Oh, that's so good. So I want to talk about hustle culture. Those darling billionaires, the tech founders that we read about. Not all of them, but some of them. They model hustle culture. To them, it's a badge of honor and status symbol, maybe. To put in 16, 18 hours a day in the name of productivity and results and scaling our business, right? And then other people learn that it's a cultural expectation. Some may even mandate it as an expectation of the job. So let's get into this mindset of first how hustle culture became so prevalent in Western society. But what have you seen? I mean, coming from the East, Eastern Europe, what have you seen here in America that gets people sucked into this hustle culture?
Well, in Soviet days, we also hustled, but in a different way. It was a socialist country, so if you chose not to, the state would still take care of you. But and I'm not a sociologist, so of course I don't know the background of how this evolved. But I think it has a lot to do with a very simple idea that we hold dear, that success requires hard work, sweat, blood, and sacrifices. And almost every story that you see in popular culture or in classical literature, for example, even, it all talks about how we have to struggle through a lot of challenges and predicaments to achieve success. And if we don't suffer, if there's no resistance, then we feel that something is wrong. Either this is not success, we are phonies, we are imposters, or it's not going to be sustainable. This is just a belief system that a lot of us subscribe to, because this is the prevalent idea which you can see everywhere. It might be, you've heard about marketing, of course, and it might be all down to just what sells. If you were watching a movie about somebody enjoying their work, loving it, and doing it effortlessly, it would probably not make much of a movie. But there are a lot of success examples like that, where people do the right thing and they love what they do and they succeed, and they never see it as a sacrifice or hard work or sweat and blood. They just do what they love. but they would make really boring plot lines for movies and books.
Right.
That's one side. The other side is because it's such a prevalent idea. Actually, before I go into that, why it's important, an analogy would be when you go to the gym. If you want to exercise, you put certain weights on the machines in the gym. And when you're done with your training, if your muscles don't burn, you feel that you haven't done enough exercise, so you're not benefiting from it. So the next time when you go, you'll obviously increase the weight so that your muscles burn, because we understand that this resistance, this burning sensation is the positive sign. That means that your body is getting benefits from the exercise. So sacrifices, hustle, hard work, it's the resistance which we equate to the results. And if we don't feel it, we think that the results are not following.
So we do more of it. Mm-hmm.
Very often we create resistance. There is even such a funny phenomenon as active procrastination. It comes from a very old research from the beginning of the 20th century, the Dodson-Yerkes, this curve about
the bell curve.
Stress and performance. So a lot of people believe in that to the point where they just start sabotaging themselves if they don't feel that burn, the resistance, the pain, the sacrifice, the sweat and the blood and so on. Now, the other side of it is that we feel guilty if we don't do that. And I do that too. I'm a very leisurely person. So if I'm reading a book and somebody's passing by, I try to make a much more serious face just in case. What if they judge me lazy because I'm reading a book in the middle of the day? So it does help when you read Plato. At least they don't judge you too much. But that, jokes aside, we very often make a show also of how busy we are. Now, the difference, and I know quite a few billionaires personally, and I've visited them, I'm not throwing people under the train, I know, but for example, Branson spends a lot of time with his family doing sports, enjoying himself. Our very dear friend who lives right next to him on the private island also spends at least a few hours every day just walking. So, and I know the difference between this 18-hour days, working days, versus you live your life, you live your day, but your business is always on your mind. And you can't switch it off. But that's about passion. That's not about hustle. If you have a relationship issue, if you have had a fight with a friend, you're not actively spending time mending that relationship, but it's on the back of your mind. And that's what we sometimes misunderstand. Yes, some passionate people do keep their business on their mind 24 hours a day. But that doesn't mean that they hustle and grind themselves to the grave. Not at all.
So maybe we need to let some of these billionaire tech founders off the hook, because they do come from a place of passion, I believe, changing the world. I mean, look at what Mr. Musk is doing, and how much the media just crucifies him for his supposed hustling. But would you say Elon is promoting a hustle culture, or is he just bringing people to work with passion?
I wouldn't dare to probably comment on Elon Musk because I'm not interested enough. I mean, of course, I know all the news, but I'm not interested enough to go deep into articles about him and, form my own opinion. But I would say that nobody is promoting, well, maybe except Gary Vaynerchuk, nobody's really promoting hustle culture, because billionaire type people, they just do what they do and how they know and how they do it. And I'll return to Richard Branson because he's the person I know personally. He, in fact, doesn't like to teach too much. He does interviews very well. You ask him questions and he'll answer the question. But he doesn't teach because what he does is not a conscious choice, in the sense that his patterns of behavior around business is not something which he designed. That's just how he is. And I would venture to guess that Elon Musk is just the way he is, and Steve Jobs was just the way he was. But we are very different, and it doesn't mean that we all have to be like them. There are plenty of people who create huge things, meaningful things, have a lot of money, but their way is different. There are a lot of, I'm sorry to use that word, but lazy people who have actually left a mark in the humanity. Because, and again, I will misapply this principle, but because there's no research directly to that, but think of the Pareto principle. Only 20% of your actions brings 80% of your results.
Right.
A lot of our actions is the show we put on to make ourselves feel better and occasionally for others to think better of us.
Yeah. Wow. So can I pull a concept from your book that I thought was kind of cool? I grew up in Southern California with the surfing culture, and you talk about surfing as an antidote to hustling. What is surfing and why is it better for us?
So you could equate it to flow, and flow theory is actually quite popularized. There's quite a lot of contemporary research on that. So you can go into that and there will be some numbers. But in my case, I wanted a slightly different analogy because, hustling is like being a hamster in a wheel. There's a lot of movement of those little paws.
Yeah, that's good.
The wheel stays in the place.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the point of hustling, so that the wheel stays in place. I think hustling is the maintaining status quo mode, or maybe the executive mode. You execute things as a hustler. But creation usually happens in a very different regime, because creation requires inspiration requires vacuum, right? Because if inspiration comes from somewhere outside, it can't come into a filled space. So that's why I call another regime surfing, because that's the easiest analogy. A surfer is this little dot somewhere in the sea, waiting for the wave. When the wave comes, the surfer jumps on the board and makes it to the coast, on top of the wave. And it's fast, it's exciting, exhilarating, it's efficient, and you still reach the shore, or you can swim to the shore. So I believe that, especially for entrepreneurs tend to slide into hustling, because this is understandable. We understand this is this logical mind that explains to you I'm sorry for the language, ass hours. I know how to put ass hours, but I sometimes don't understand how to put inspiration and genius. That's why I'd rather do the ass hours and spend all that time and do the work, because then at least I'll feel I've done my best, because waiting for the wave and riding the wave is just so scary. It's inexplicable. But that's the difference between our logical side and our inspired side. Inspiration cannot be explained with logic, and the best comparison is surfing the wave.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make a big transition, but I want to make sure that is there anything else we should know about hustle culture? Because the transition is going to be a big one.
I actually wonder, this all comes from the first part of my book, and I think this is just so relevant to so many people, and this is this little hook that allows people to get interested. But I actually don't research that so much. I'm much more into the inner world of the people, and if hustling is what you like to do, then good. If you're happy, or the only problem with hustling is that very often we do that to run away from bigger problems, which are just inexplicable and hard to solve.
Wow. Okay. That is profound. Okay. Vulnerability. Here we go. Another big trendy word like authenticity, these days. And thank you, Brene Brown, for making it almost like a household name, right? So you're a supporter of vulnerability, but you also caution against the dark side of vulnerability, which I don't think many of us understand. So you label it vulnerability tyranny. Break it down for us.
So thanks for mentioning Brene Brown, because she's also, being a big proponent of vulnerability. She also says that too much of vulnerability is actually not it. But I would actually say that yes, I think that vulnerability is important and good, and I am a proponent of it. But to the same level as I would say, ibuprofen is good if you have pain. The problem is that for our society, vulnerability is the dose of medicine that we have to take, because we have forgotten the true face of ours behind the polished facades that we put up. So Today I had a mess up in plans, and this is the first time in life that I'm showing up at an interview without makeup. It's a historical moment.
As if I could tell.
It was a hard choice for me to do, but I thought it's important to, it's important to be there emotionally and cognitively, and I will sacrifice that little facade for the sake of being ready to do the interview rather than, fidgeting about less important things. So I kind of understand that we need facades because that makes us feel better about ourselves. But the problem is that we forget who we are behind that facade. Now, vulnerability is the medicine that we as a society should take, but it is as far as it goes. And I don't think that is a solution for everything, because vulnerability in essence means you have to put yourself in the situation where you're a little bit helpless, or you're at the mercy of others, right? Is it absolutely necessary? Well, we are at the mercy of people when we fly the plane, for example, or other situations. But is it absolutely necessary for an authentic, fulfilled, happy life? I do not know. I think if you've reached the point of honesty with yourself, you can choose to use vulnerability in those circumstances where it is absolutely necessary. Do I need to be vulnerable with people in my team? Well, if we are messing up and they're looking up to me, maybe I do. But just for the sake of being vulnerable because this is fashionable, maybe we have to choose our measures based on our circumstances. Like you wouldn't pop ibuprofen if I don't know, you have indigestion, but you would do that if you have a headache, right? So vulnerability is just one of those medicines which we sometimes have to take, but it's not it's not something that you need on a daily basis. And I know I'm saying something so horrible, and a lot of people will hate me for that.
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between, what vulnerability is and what it's not, especially in the, I guess I hate to say the word transactional, in the transactional way of conducting business day to day, because, sometimes that's what it is. And we want to break down those walls, but it doesn't give you license to say, share your deepest, darkest secrets, in public or in front of a team. And so to me, it's not, it's not, if you're coming from a traumatic life event or a life of trauma, there are tell me if you're tracking with this, there are places to go to express those kind of intensely painful emotions. And I wouldn't say that the workplace is the right environment for that. We can certainly support people and point them in the right direction. I just don't know if in the course of the business day, you want to open up that much of a window for people to jump through, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for feeding me my own food. We should have started with the definition. You're right. So the definition of vulnerability is taking a brave action without knowing how it's going to be perceived, or without knowing the consequences, right? So it's courage in the face of uncertainty. So that's the currently accepted definition of vulnerability. Now, you mentioned breaking down the walls. We're sometimes so self-obsessed that we think that the only way to break down the walls is just, let me share a story about you, and then maybe you're going to be so inspired that you'll share your story. Sometimes I put up posts about the things that I'm afraid, and of course, some people will say like, oh, thank you, because I'm also afraid of the same things, or something like that. But it's not the only way to break down the walls. Imagine you are having a meeting or a conversation, let's say, with your colleagues. Sometimes breaking down the walls is just being there, not judging, being kind, being understanding, listening, hearing. This can also break down the walls. It has nothing to do with you being vulnerable, but it's sometimes more practical in relationships with other people. Now, the problem that we currently have is that because the vulnerability has become such a buzzword, the very striking example is when somebody comes up on stage and shares something so touching, something so painful, and everybody's in tears and snot, and everybody's like, oh my God, we're so vulnerable and we feel so connected, so human.
Right.
But that's an extreme example. You can be vulnerable in the situations where you're not sharing anything about yourself. You know, if you're trying to make friends in the new place and you approach someone and try to be nice to them, that's also making you vulnerable. In my case, I like to make jokes, and I'm not very good at joking. And very often my jokes end up being met with icy silence. And I have been vulnerable in that moment because I was trying to lift up the mood. And what I got was misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I shared nothing about myself personally. So it's very important to understand now, as a speaker, I have stories about my life, of course, which I share. I don't share everything, naturally, because I'm a very private person. But I have stories about my life, about my mistakes, about my hard moments, which I share from stage. But I've shared them from stage several times, and I know exactly what reactions they are going to elicit in my audience.
Yeah.
When I share that story, even if a tear comes to my eye, it doesn't make me vulnerable, because I do that as a means of driving a point. I know the outcome exactly.
That's it. That's it right there. So for people that may be thinking, Marcel, you're going against what you preach. I just want to be clear that I'm not encouraging sharing of painful and traumatic events to be a cultural or social norm in the day-to-day of work. But I have seen situations where somebody shares something out of a vulnerable space, and other people are so touched by it that it brings people together. And like you said, those are special occasions that we have to treasure, and not discourage people from doing that. I mean, yeah, and so it's when the work environment becomes an open space for therapy. That to me is we need now to protect the workplace from coming into a meeting and circle the chairs and start to share like you're in a 12-step program. Okay.
Well, there is also such a concept that when people are too vulnerable or share too much, that this is just an emotional dump. Very often that's the way people deal with their hard emotions. They just dump it all out because, if I let it all out, you can't judge me anymore. And that's also, the question is, everything has to have a purpose and a reason. What are you trying to achieve with your communication?
Yeah.
If you're trying to achieve with your communication is feel better, then please be honest about it. You're just trying to make yourself feel better. Now, again, I've been in personal growth for 20 years, and I've seen speakers, the best speakers in the world. And trust me, I've seen speakers who share very personal stories on stage, shed a tear, and yet later they're afraid to admit that they don't know something, or they may have been wrong with something. Now, sometimes admitting that you don't know the answer or you're lost is much more vulnerable than sharing a story that you know.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with work.
Right. So I'm going to bring this back to work, and I'm going to push back against the forces of hypermasculinity. Okay, Kristina. So, and here's what I see so often in my coaching sessions and my, when I sit down with the executives, is that lack of vulnerability, because they think that it's the soft and warm, fuzzy stuff that we've been talking about, sharing and deep emotions and all that. But I call them to the carpet when I don't see them being emotionally honest about those things in the face of it. You said it best. It is the willingness to do something courageous in the face of uncertainty, right? So how often do leaders sweep something under the rug because they are afraid of showing up by being emotionally honest, emotionally present about a situation that is going to affect other people in the workplace? A customer pulling out of an account, a project gone south, et cetera, right? So yeah, in those moments is when vulnerability needs to show up. And that's when it's most effective, I think, is when things are uncertain and we don't know the way forward, to stand in that vulnerable space with people and say, here's what's going on.
So we're touching upon the theory of social roles. And I'll simplify it, of course, but different social roles in society have a different set of characteristics. So we as a society tend to define the social role of a leader, a strong leader, with very masculine traits. And this is something which we've probably, ground into our subconscious over the centuries of military leadership as being one of the examples of the strong leadership. And that's probably the aversion, where the aversion for the so-called perceived weakness comes from. Now, when people are afraid to show their weaknesses, and I'll just use the word weakness, it doesn't mean that they are like emotionally weak or hysterical or don't know, whatever you consider as weakness. For a lot of people, for a lot of leaders, weakness means, being lost, not knowing the answer, not being, being disappointed, being depressed, actually, being human. For a lot of leaders, that is a weakness. So let's say weakness. I think this tendency to sweep weaknesses under the rug comes from misunderstanding the situation from a purely psychological point of view. We think that if we show our weakness, it's not a boxing match. Where if an opponent shows where their weakness is, if I'm attacking you, I'm going to use your weakness to floor you. It's not a boxing match. We sometimes misunderstanding that your team is your allies. Sorry, I can't pronounce this. English is my third language. Your supporters. Your team is your supporters. They are on your side. So. And because of that, we think that showing weakness is actually something which is going to make our position shaky. Now, from a purely psychological point of view, if you're working with a team, if you're working with other people, and you're really lost very often, rather than pretending that you know what you're doing and making people run in circles just to keep up the appearances that I have everything under control, it's much more productive to acknowledge that I am at a loss. Let's decide what we do together. But, it has nothing to do with masculinity and femininity. It just has to do with having clear mind and understanding the dynamics between people. It just happens so that women tend to be naturally a little bit more attuned to relationships with other people. So we say that this is a feminine quality. But actually, if you just understand psychology to a degree, you would see that acknowledging mistakes, acknowledging that you are lost, you don't know where to go, or that you're demotivated, is not a weakness. It's just stating the obvious. When the doctor sees the patient with a broken bone, unless the doctor says the bone is broken, they don't know how to fix it. You can't pretend that, but the arm is intact, everything is going to be fine. So, if you as a leader having a moment of weakness, not acknowledging that weakness, it's like ignoring the broken bone.
Yeah. All right, I want another point of transition and bring in this idea of self-love. And so I'm going to set it up like this. We talk a lot about self-care, right? And to be able to care for yourself or to care for others, you have to take care of yourself first. The imagery of pulling down the oxygen mask, put it on you first before the person next to you, right? You call us to something else that goes beyond self-care, and this is the whole concept of self-love. Tell us about it.
Well, the mask is the self-care, right?
Yeah.
So the very simple analogy would be my phone. Those who can see it. With my kids. So I like to say that I don't charge this device out of love for it. I charge it because if I don't, it will die. It will not work, right? And for me to be able to use it, I need to charge it. So self-care is in essence charging your device. And self-love is a relationship. Now, why we confuse the two, or why we tend to do more self-care and less self-love, is because the same thing. Do you remember when we were talking about hustling culture? Yeah. We understand the tangible stuff. We understand the effort, putting the hours into things, or putting the time into things. Now, relationship is not ritualistic by nature. Dating is ritualistic, right? Like you could date someone, but do you love them? You can date someone without loving them, or you can love someone without dating them. So now, I know it's a funny analogy, but dating is the ritual and love is the relationship. Now, self-care is a ritual, and because it's ritual, it's tangible, it's understandable, it's easy to put down in a list, to-do list, for example, or check-off list. Relationship it's not even a feeling, it's a complex connection, complex, elusive connection, which is really hard sometimes to even describe and explain. Now, another analogy that I like to make is that when a child is born, let's say a stereotypical rich child in a very affluent family who has everything, good clothes, good house, good school, good food, nannies, teachers, everything. But we all understand if that child doesn't get the love, if not of parents, then at least of the caretakers, this child is never going to grow up into a healthy, happy, fulfilled human being. Because taking care of your needs is not enough. Now, that's the big difference. And the problem is because we don't know how self-love looks. We're afraid of it. We don't understand it. We confuse self-love with self-care. We confuse self-love with selfishness, with being self-obsessed. We confuse self-love with indulgence, complacency. So we are afraid of it. We don't know how it looks. So that's why we do the simple thing, the rituals, which makes us feel a little better.
Can you give us some examples of the rituals?
Well, meditate, go out for a walk, take a shower, have a bath.
Yeah.
This is a very good care of your body. And some of those rituals might make you feel a little better emotionally. But self-love is when you wake up depressed, you don't take a shower, you don't meditate, you don't go on a walk, but you don't hate yourself for that. You recognize your humanity. You recognize that you're having a problem. You are committed enough to actually deal with that problem and not, eat yourself up for not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
I know it's a slippery slope.
I'm going to bring us to a slow kind of close, but I want to make sure that there's a couple of stones I want to turn. One is, what's your definition of success?
Oh, I'll be very boring. Success is being the best in the world in something. Not maybe in the world, but one of the best, let's say on top, whether it's you in your professional career or money. And I like to keep it at that.
Okay.
And
great.
I know there are a lot of questions, but and I'll probably go a little bit ahead and answer the biggest objection. How about happiness and fulfillment? That's about happiness and fulfillment. It's not about success. And yes, success without happiness is probably useless and probably not going to make you happy, obviously. But by clashing and colliding all the concepts, we are doing disservice both to success and to happiness and fulfillment. I'd like to keep them separate because I think what we lack as a society is a serious conversation about happiness and fulfillment. Let's not lump it under success.
Yeah. Do you have that kind of that one line statement that defines living a flawsome life? If you were to boil down this whole conversation to the bottom line, how do we live a flawsome life?
It's a little twist to one quote that I heard. So I'll give the original. Happy are those people who are on a detour and can still enjoy the scenery.
Oh, okay. I like that.
That's what it's about.
Very good. Very good. Well, Kristina, what's your ultimate hope for people reading this book?
I would like the people who read my book to come to peace with themselves.
Okay.
Just that.
Yeah. It's funny that we kind of started on that. You brought peace into the discussion and we're ending it with peace.
Maybe it's my characteristic of my age.
All right. As we come down to the wire, I pose you the leadership love question. This is personal to me. I believe love is sort of the solution to fear and uncertainty, to bridging our divides, right? And it's a very big umbrella term, of course. But I always like to ask my guests when it comes down to, say, human relationships, whether it's one-on-one or one-on group, or bringing that organizationally as a cultural systemic value, right? How do we lead our businesses, our employees with more practical and actionable love day in and day out?
So I'll have to take a little step back before I answer this question. I believe that your relationship with the world is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. So if you learn to be kind, patient, loving, understanding with yourself, it's much easier to be so with other people. So I would bring it back. How do you bring more love into your work environment, or any environment for that matter? Bring more love into your relationship with yourself.
That's great. Okay. All right. Well, we bring it home with two final questions. Here they are. Personally, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
So talking about vulnerability, these are two questions in one. What's tugging on my heart and what I would like you to know. And they might not be the same. So with that said, I have another big passion project. I have become a hobby farmer recently, and I'm restoring my ancestral home of 400 years to become a museum. And that's one thing that takes a lot of my time and a lot of my passion.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to put that in the show notes for sure. All right. And finally, hey, you close us out. What's that one thing that we can take away with us to help our lives become flossom?
So I'll quote Cinderella's mother. It's one of my favorite quotes in personal growth from a movie, Cinderella. So she said, "Have courage and be kind."
Kristina, you are smart, but more importantly, you are wise. And we are all blessed by this conversation, I have no doubt. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was a very, very pleasant conversation. Thank you.
I'm glad you thought so. All right, point us to a few places. Where can people find you? Where can they go to connect with you?
So I believe my book is still in the bookshops in US. I hope so. And so you'll find them there. But other than that, of course, Mindvalley. I'm a co-founder of Mindvalley. So of course, I'll invite you to my to my baby.
Sounds good. Well, you can keep this conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And like I said, look for my show notes. I'm going to include everything in there, how to get a hold of Kristina and all her websites, and a YouTube link to watch the show on my website. And you can go to marcelschwantes.com to find that. And finally, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.